Hi there. Welcome to my channel. So this is my first video and since my channel is called Persephone Rising 1111, I thought it only appropriate to read or tell the story of Persephone and Demeter. So I don't know about you, but I enjoy being read to, and I think I have since I was a little kid. And I read to my son, and sometimes I still read to my students. Um, so I'm going to read for you The Myth of Persephone and Demeter. And I'm reading from this book, D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths, and this is a book that I've had for like 30 years. Um, and I used to read this to my son when he was little. So I think it's pretty good, and the illustrations are really beautiful. It's illustrated by, I think it's a couple, Ingrid and Edgar Daulaire. Okay, Persephone. Persephone grew up on Olympus, and her gay laughter rang through the brilliant halls. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her mother loved her so dearly she could not bear to have her out of her sight. When Demeter sat on her golden throne, her daughter was always on her lap. When she went down to earth to look after the trees and fields, she took Persephone with her. Wherever Persephone danced on her light feet, flowers sprang up. She was so lovely and full of grace that even Hades, who saw so little, noticed her and fell in love with her. Hades, as you may know, is the god of the underworld. So his realm was under the earth. He wanted her for his queen, but he knew that her mother would never consent to part with her. So he decided to carry her off. One day, as Persephone ran about in the meadow gathering flowers, she strayed away from her mother and the attending nymphs. Suddenly, the ground split open, and up from the yawning crevice came a dark chariot drawn by black horses. At the reins stood grim Hades. He seized the terrified girl, turned his horses, and plunged back into the ground. A herd of pigs rooting in the meadow tumbled into the cleft, and Persephone's cries for help died out as the ground closed again, as suddenly as it had opened. Up in the field, a little swineherd stood and wept over the pigs he lost, while Demeter rushed wildly about in the meadow, looking in vain for her daughter, who had vanished without leaving a trace. With the frightened girl in his arms, Hades raced his snorting horses down away from the sunlit world. Down and down they sped on the dark path to his dismal underground palace. He led weeping Persephone in. God, what a jerk. I mean, seriously. Seated her beside him on a throne of black marble and decked her with gold and precious stones. But the jewels brought her no joy. She wanted no cold stones. She longed for warm sunshine and flowers and her golden trussed mother. Dead souls crowded out from cracks and crevices to look at their new queen, while ever more souls came across the river Styx, and Persephone watched them drink from a spring under dark poplars. It was the spring of Lethe, and those who drank from its waters forgot who they were and what they had done on earth. Rhadamanthus, a judge of the dead, dealt out punishment to the souls of great sinners. They were sentenced to suffer forever under the whips of the avenging Erinyes. Heroes were led to the Elysian fields, where they lived happily forever in never-failing light. Around the palace of Hades there was a garden where whispering poplars and weeping willows grew. They had no flowers and bore no fruit, and no birds sang in their branches. There was only one tree in the whole realm of Hades that bore fruit. That was a little pomegranate tree. The gardener of the underworld offered the tempting pomegranates to the queen, but Persephone refused to touch the food of the dead. Wordlessly, she walked through the garden at silent Hades' side, and slowly her heart turned to ice. Above, on earth, Demeter ran about searching for her lost daughter, and all nature grieved with her. Flowers wilted, trees lost their leaves, and the fields grew barren and cold. In vain did the plow cut through the icy ground. Nothing could sprout, and nothing could grow, while the goddess of the harvest wept. People and animals starved, and the gods begged Demeter again to bless the earth. But she refused to let anything grow until she had found her daughter. Bent with grief, Demeter turned into a gray old woman. She returned to the meadow where Persephone had vanished and asked the sun if he had seen what had happened. But he said no. Dark clouds had hidden his face that day. She wandered around the meadow, and after a while she met a youth whose name was Triptolemus. He told her that his brother, a swineherd, had seen his pigs disappear into the ground and had heard the frightened screams of a girl. Demeter now understood that Hades had kidnapped her daughter, and her grief turned to anger. She called to Zeus and said she would never again make the earth green if he did not command Hades to return Persephone. Zeus could not let the world perish, and he sent Hermes down to Hades, bidding him to let Persephone go. Even Hades had to obey the orders of Zeus, and sadly he said farewell to his queen. Joyfully, Persephone leaped to her feet, but as she was leaving with Hermes, a hooting laugh came from the garden. There stood the gardener of Hades, grinning. He pointed to a pomegranate from which a few of the kernels were missing. Persephone, lost in thought, had eaten the seeds, he said. Then dark Hades smiled. He watched Hermes lead Persephone up to the bright world above. He knew that she must return to him, for she had tasted the food of the dead. When Persephone again appeared on earth, Demeter sprang to her feet with a cry of joy and rushed to greet her daughter. No longer was she a sad old woman, but a radiant goddess. Again she blessed her fields, and the flowers bloomed anew, and the grain ripened. Dear child, she said, never again shall we be parted. Together we shall make all nature bloom. But joy soon was changed to sadness, for Persephone had to admit that she had tasted the food of the dead and must return to Hades. However, Zeus decided that mother and daughter should not be parted forever. He ruled that Persephone had to return to Hades and spend 1 month in the underworld for each seed that she had eaten. Every year when Persephone left her, Demeter grieved. Nothing grew, and there was winter on earth. But as soon as her daughter's light footsteps were heard, the whole earth burst into bloom. Spring had come. As long as mother and daughter were together, the earth was warm and bore fruit. Demeter was a kind goddess. She did not want mankind to starve, during the cold months of winter when Persephone was away. She lent her chariot laden with grain to Triptolemus, the youth who had helped her to find her lost daughter. She told him to scatter her golden grain over the world and teach men how to sow it in spring and reap it in fall and store it away for the long months when again the earth was barren and cold. And there's a drawing of Demeter and Persephone, Persephone coming up out of the earth into Demeter's arms. So that myth has been one of, since I was a child, that myth has just stayed with me. Something about it just was so meaningful to me. And throughout the course of my life, it's returned again and again in my consciousness. And now that I'm older and wiser, um, I have a deeper understanding of why. But um, I think it's an eternal myth, and probably why it's at the basis of the Eleusinian mysteries, which were um, honored every single year in Athens for something like three 3,000 years, 2,000 years, um, and still they don't really know. Um, Historians and archaeologists, I mean, they've unearthed, there are new um, relics from the site, but they in Greece, but they still, don't have the full picture of what exactly happened um, in the temple of Demeter during the Eleusinian when the mysteries were um, performed, and they have some clues, but they don't know what the vision was. There was a vision that was seen or experienced, and there's a lot of theories about it. But I just finished reading a book called Eleusis, and I'll show it to you next time, but I don't have it with me right now. But it was quite fascinating and written by a historian. It's not a new book, but it yeah, it was just really interesting to read about like what they do know, what the theories are, and how it was possibly connected. I mean, in my mind, it seems like it was definitely Persephone was an image or a symbol of transformation, regeneration, rebirth, going into the underworld, and then emerging again in this like cyclical way, um, a symbol of the cycles of life and death, um, and eternal life, really. But so what I wanted to show you is so this was the first so this was the first piece that I made, and I didn't know that I was going to create Persephone. Um, Not the first piece I've ever made in my life because I've been an artist for my whole life and for a long time. But in this kind of vein, in this series, and all this whole process of making these kind of archetypal goddesses has been this incredible experience, this journey that I have been going on that kind of all started about um, probably 6 months ago, 9 months ago, around November when I started to have these experiences. And at the time, I was in a very difficult relationship that was very painful and traumatic, and um, probably one of the ways that I know one of the ways that I dealt with it was just putting it into my work, go and putting it out on the paper. And because that's how I process. That's one of the ways that I process, especially when I'm completely overwhelmed and with, you know, confusion and emotions and all this kind of stuff that is just too complex. Um, and I don't really, oh, I'm not going to say that. Talking to people is great, but ultimately, the whole experience took me deeper into myself and deeper into like this process of exploration, into my own psyche, my own soul, if you will, my own self. And so, what I uncovered was Persephone. And I just started out making a woman's face that was probably supposed to be me in the beginning. And through this process of just kind of letting her spill out onto the page and letting her arrive there, I realized, whoa, I feel like I feel like this is Persephone. So she just kind of like presented herself to me. And I think of her as like the great transformer. Um, and I titled her Empress of the Cause of the Compost, making shit happen. Because I was going through so much difficulty and felt so alone with it, but it was like I wasn't going to let it defeat me. And so instead, I turned it into something, I turned it into gold. And that's why, at least for me, it was gold because it brought me on this whole journey of self discovery and self understanding of why I was in this relationship in the first place and uh, what I was doing there, what I was learning, and what I was needing to see about myself. Um, and for me personally, that has been the only way to work with those kinds of life experiences because um, otherwise, yeah, because I don't relate to. I mean, I've just grown out of that whole idea of like myself as a victim, um, helpless. I don't ever, yeah. So, because for me, it's like I'm gonna learn from it because my belief system is that there's a reason that I am in this situation and it's not just like random. So, but it's all about learning and growing. But anyway, doesn't mean it wasn't like radically painful. But um, so that's kind of why I decided to make the channel. And I never thought I would make a YouTube channel in my entire life. I was like, this is the last thing I ever thought I would do. But then I just thought, I wonder if other people would relate to this process or get something out of it. And I thought I felt like I just wanted to share. And if people like it and get and resonate with it, then awesome. Um, and yeah, so I'm really super happy if you press play on this video and you're still listening because I know I'm a rambler, and I haven't rehearsed all this and it's not scripted, that obviously. But I hope you'll come back because we're going to make some art together. And I want to just probably share with you some of the ways that I go about this this kind of medium of mixed media collage. And yeah, so that's pretty much all I want to say. So until next time, thanks for joining me so much. I'm really glad you stopped by and I hope you come again. All right. Take care. Have a beautiful day and evening wherever you are. All right.